Many times in theological conversations, we find people ignoring our very best arguments, which can be really frustrating. In a recent video, Leighton Flowers made some really insightful comments when commenting on what James White said that I just had to show you guys. Just for some context, Leighton, Warren McGrew, and Jordan from the Great Light Studios channel were responding to all of this Ballgate nonsense. Leighton was giving a critique of a view of Calvinism, and Jordan was like, it seems like James White will not respond to all of the strongest arguments. He responds to these random things on Twitter that don't mean anything, but he won't respond to these really the strongest case.
Because we will get as deranged as God decreed us to be.
Why doesn't White respond to that, but he will take the time to respond to a 1-minute clip like the one he found on Twitter?
Leighton's response was awesome.
Tim Stratton laid out the free thinking argument. Instead of answering his free thinking argument, he makes fun of him for using, his analogies to movies and things like that, and plays it in the clip at the beginning with Tim Stratton. Instead of answering the argument, he will mock the person,
right,
or will deride the person and all those kinds of things. Why? Here's the reason. The strongest arguments are typically ignored by your opponent. In other words, they're skipped over. And by the way, I have caught myself doing this at times. I have caught myself when an argument is presented and I know it's difficult to answer. Maybe it's because it just takes a long time to answer and I don't want to take the time. And so sometimes I'll skip it because I know it takes a long time. Sometimes it's just a difficult subject. I'll be honest, the doctrine of hell is really difficult for me. And when Chris Date brings up annihilationism and those kinds of things, I'm not sure where I land on that. I'm still grappling with it. I've studied some of it, but I'll be honest with you, I skip it sometimes, because it's a difficult thing to talk about. It's a difficult thing to argue. There are several things like that I've come across in my own studies where I'll catch myself and I'll think, you know what, I'm purposefully trying to skip that because, yeah, that one's a hard one to answer. And so I know that about myself and I recognize it. I'm willing to admit it. I don't know that some people are even recognize that about themselves or recognize when they're doing that. But that's our tendencies in these kinds of debates, especially someone who's debating as many people as White is. He's got thousands of arrows being thrown at him every day from all the people that he's critiqued over his lifetime. And so he's getting barrage from every which way because he's, he can't stand the heat, don't get in the kitchen, and he can stand it because he's just throwing out all kinds of critiques to everybody. So he's always getting stuff. He has to choose which of those things he's going to respond to and answer. And I think naturally he's going to skip the hardest ones and the most difficult ones.
This idea of why do we ignore arguments is really crucial for people trying to find truth. Oftentimes, the best arguments require us to actively listen to people we disagree with, and we are going to miss out on what's right if we are uncomfortable about the potential of being wrong. I also love how Leighton doesn't take this as an opportunity to let's dunk on James White moment. While he's like, yes, I've noticed that, he's also like, hey, I do it too. And the truth is, I'd be willing to bet that we all do it. Everyone listening. I know I do sometimes. The biggest thing is that, one, we have to recognize when we get that uncomfortable feeling, that anxious feeling. We might get it because we feel like we are about to be attacked or we're scared. Recognize that feeling. Recognize when you go from listening to a podcast of someone you disagree with and you randomly click off and want to do something else. I know for me, it's subconscious. Recognizing is one of the biggest things you can do. Once you recognize, start to question yourself. Why does that make me feel uncomfortable? Am I scared of something? Afraid of being wrong, perhaps? Maybe there's a much deeper insecurity there. The same applies for when, instead of running away from the best arguments, we feel the urge to attack. Maybe one day we'll get Leighton to talk about that. Anyways, this has been fun. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. And don't forget to check out our most recent video on what Warren McGrew said about infant damnation and child sacrifice.